The days on the ranch continued to pass, and Clara was slowly beginning to adjust to life in Texas. While she still missed the familiar streets of Boston and the life she had left behind, she was starting to find a rhythm in the work. She no longer felt completely out of place, though she still had moments of doubt. The ranch was still vast, the land endless, and sometimes she felt so small next to it. But Jack's patience and quiet support were helping her find confidence, little by little. The weather in Texas was often unpredictable, and Clara had to get used to the intense heat during the day and the chilly nights. She had been raised in a cool climate, and the scorching sun was a constant challenge. But it wasn't just the heat that Clara was learning to manage. It was also the weight of the work. Each task was bigger and more demanding than the last, and there were days when she was exhausted by the time the sun set. But Jack was always there, working beside her, showing her how to do things with a calm, steady manner. One afternoon, after a particularly hot day of feeding the livestock and cleaning the barn, Jack invited Clara to go for a ride with him. It was something he had done with the other women who had lived on the ranch, though it was a rare treat. Clara had always felt a bit nervous on horseback, but she decided to go. Maybe this could be the time to connect with Jack in a way she hadn't before. When they met at the barn, Clara's nerves were on edge. She had seen Jack ride before with a skill and confidence that seemed to come naturally to him. He was at home on horseback, moving with grace and strength. Clara, on the other hand, had only ridden a few times and had never been particularly comfortable on a horse. But Jack was kind about it, helping her mount the horse and adjusting the saddle. As they rode out into the wide-open fields, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the land. The rolling hills, the distant mountains, and the endless sky made her feel both free and small at the same time. She tried to focus on keeping her balance, but it was hard not to be distracted by the beauty around her. Jack was riding beside her, his calm presence making her feel at ease. She had always been nervous around him. His size, his strength, and the way he seemed so sure of himself made her feel like she could never measure up. But out here, on the open land, it was different. Jack spoke to her in a quiet, reassuring voice, telling her about the land, the animals, and his life before the ranch. Clara listened, fascinated by his stories. He had grown up on a small farm in the East, but he had come to Texas to seek something bigger. The land had called to him, and it had taken all his strength and determination to build the ranch into what it was today. As they rode, Jack's voice softened. This land has a way of getting under your skin. It's not always easy, but there's a peace to it that I can't explain. I've worked hard for everything here, but it's the kind of work that makes you feel like you've earned every inch of the land. Clara felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to him. She could sense the pride he took in his work, but there was something more in his words, a deep love for the land and the life he had chosen. She realized that Jack wasn't just a cowboy. He was a man who had poured everything he had into building this life. It wasn't just about survival. It was about belonging to something, about creating something that would last. You've worked so hard for all of this, Clara said softly, her voice full of awe. I can see that now. I didn't really understand it before, but I think I'm starting to. Jack glanced at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something different in his eyes, something gentler. He nodded, as if he appreciated her understanding. You've got a good heart, Clara, he said quietly. I know you're not used to this life, but I've never once doubted you. You're stronger than you think. Clara felt a warm feeling spread through her at his words. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone like Jack. She had always been self-conscious about her smallness, her softness, her city upbringing, but Jack's words made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as out of place as she had thought. As they continued to ride, Clara began to relax more, her fears about the horse fading. She found herself enjoying the peacefulness of the ride, the rhythm of the horse's movements matching her heartbeat. The land around them stretched out endlessly, and Clara could almost feel the connection between Jack and this place, a bond that went deeper than just the physical work. It was a bond that came from years of living with the land, understanding its rhythms and its demands. They rode for hours, and as the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The tension that had been building inside her seemed to melt away, and she realized how much she had missed moments like this. Quiet, calm, and without the pressure of constant work. For the first time, Clara felt like she was truly experiencing the beauty of the ranch, not just as a place she had to work, but as a part of something larger. When they returned to the ranch house, Clara was tired but content. She had never been on such a long ride before, and she felt a sense of accomplishment for having made it through without falling off the horse. Jack helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady as always. But there was something different in the way he looked at her. It wasn't the same distant, somewhat cautious look he had given her before. Now there was warmth in his gaze, a kind of respect that Clara hadn't seen before. "Good ride," he said, his voice soft. "You did well out there." Clara smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "Thank you, Jack. I was nervous at first, but it felt good once I got the hang of it." Jack nodded, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. The space between them seemed smaller now, the distance that had always existed between them starting to shrink. Clara realized that despite everything she had felt about her smallness and her struggles, she was beginning to understand Jack, and he was beginning to understand her. As she made her way to the house, Jack followed her, and they talked about everything and nothing at all. It was a new kind of conversation for Clara. She had always kept to herself, always been careful with her words, but now she found herself speaking freely, sharing things she hadn't expected to. And Jack, for his part, seemed to be opening up too, his stories becoming more personal, his laughter warmer. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she thought about the day. She had learned so much, not just about the ranch, but about herself. She had come so far from the unsure woman who had stepped off the train just weeks ago. The woman who had felt small and out of place was starting to find her footing. She was beginning to understand the land, the work, and Jack in a way she hadn't before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, Clara felt a quiet confidence that she could face whatever came next. Clara woke up to the sound of birds singing and the sun rising over the wide, open plains of Texas. She was still adjusting to the new world around her. Everything was different from the city life she had known. There were no busy streets, no tall buildings, no familiar faces. Instead, she was surrounded by endless fields and the harsh, dry heat of the desert. Even the air felt different here, thick and heavy as if it was full of dust. As Clara got up and dressed, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The newness of everything still made her feel small, as if she didn't quite belong. She had imagined a peaceful life with Jack, but the reality was much harder than she had anticipated. The work on the ranch was never ending. There was always something that needed to be done, feeding the animals, cleaning the barn, or fixing fences that had been knocked over by the wind. It was hard, physical labor, and Clara was used to none of it. She had never worked on a farm before. In Boston, she had spent her days sewing, cleaning the house, and doing small chores for her family. Here it was completely different. Everything seemed to be big, bigger than anything she had ever seen. The ranch was vast, stretching out in every direction. Jack's house was large, but compared to the endless land surrounding it, it looked small. The first few days were the hardest. Clara could hardly keep up with Jack's pace. He moved through the tasks with ease, knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. He was strong and steady, his large hands capable of handling everything from animal care to repairing the ranch's equipment. Clara, on the other hand, struggled with even the simplest of tasks. She had never lifted hay bales or mucked out a stable before, and every time she tried, she felt clumsy. She could see Jack's concerned eyes following her as she worked, but he never said anything. It wasn't that Jack wasn't kind, he was. He never raised his voice or criticized her, but there was a distance between them. He had lived his life here for so long that he didn't know how to explain things to her. Clara had grown up in a city, in a world where everything was orderly and predictable. Here, there were no rules to follow except the ones of nature, and Clara was learning how unforgiving the land could be. One morning, after a particularly rough day of trying to help in the barn, Clara sat down on a log outside. Her hands were sore and her back ached. She had tried so hard to be helpful, but it seemed like no matter how much she tried, she was always one step behind. Jack had been kind enough to show her the basics, but she could tell he wasn't entirely convinced she was up to the task. He was a man used to doing everything himself, and Clara was beginning to wonder if she was more of a burden than a help. Clara's thoughts were interrupted when Jack came outside. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle. Clara took the coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know, Jack, I feel so out of place here. I can't do any of this. It's like I'm in the way." Jack sat down beside her on the log. His gaze was thoughtful as he took a sip of his coffee. "I know it's hard, but you're here now and that's what matters. Things take time. You'll get the hang of it." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with frustration. "But I don't know if I can. I've never done anything like this before. Back in Boston, I was just a seamstress. My hands were never meant for hard work like this." Jack studied her for a long moment as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't expect you to be a rancher the day you arrived. This life isn't for everyone, but that doesn't mean you don't belong here. You've got more strength in you than you think." Clara wasn't sure if she believed him, but something about his words gave her a little spark of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe with time she could learn to adjust. The days that followed weren't any easier, but Clara began to notice small changes. She was getting a little better at the work, though it still wasn't easy. Jack began to show her a few more tasks, explaining things with patience she hadn't expected. It was clear that he wasn't angry with her, but he still kept his distance. There was a strange tension between them, an unspoken understanding that they were both trying to figure out how to make their new life work. One day, Clara was asked to help with the chickens. It seemed like a simple task, just collect the eggs and make sure the animals were fed. But as she entered the chicken coop, she felt a sense of dread. The chickens were loud and flapped their wings in all directions. Clara wasn't sure how to handle them, and she was afraid of making a mistake. As she stepped forward, one of the chickens squawked and flapped its wings wildly, causing Clara to stumble backward. She let out a small scream, and the chickens scattered even more. Her heart raced as she tried to collect herself. Jack had been watching from a distance, and he came over with a laugh. "Here, let me show you," he said, stepping into the coop. He moved with ease, gathering the eggs and calming the chickens with a few soft words. Clara watched, her eyes wide. She had never seen anyone handle animals like this before. When Jack finished, he turned to her. "See? You just need to be patient. They can sense when you're nervous." Clara nodded, trying to hide her embarrassment. She was grateful for Jack's help, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that she was failing at every turn. Despite her struggles, there were moments of connection. Jack, though quiet and reserved, began to share little stories about his life. How he had come to Texas years ago, how he had built his ranch from the ground up. Clara listened, fascinated by his experiences, though she still felt like an outsider in his world. One afternoon, after a long day's work, Clara and Jack sat on the porch of the ranch house. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land. The stillness of the evening felt peaceful, and Clara found herself drawn to the simple beauty of the scene. Jack, too, seemed to relax as he stared out at the horizon. For the first time since she arrived, Clara didn't feel quite so alone. She realized that although everything was hard and unfamiliar, she was beginning to adapt. She was learning. Slowly but surely, she was finding her place in Jack's world, and maybe, just maybe, she could learn to live here with him. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she thought about the day. She wasn't perfect. She had made mistakes, but she was trying. She was beginning to see that she wasn't just here because she had nowhere else to go. She was here because she wanted to be. The work was hard. The land was unforgiving. But there was something about the simplicity of it all that made her feel more alive than she had ever felt in the city. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But for tonight, Clara closed her eyes with a small sense of accomplishment. She was starting to fit into this strange new world, and for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she could make it. Clara had never imagined that her life would take such a drastic turn. Growing up in Boston, she had always been surrounded by the hustle and bustle of city life. The cobblestone streets, the crowded markets, and the towering buildings were all she knew. But as the years passed, life became harder. Her parents had died in an illness when she was young, and she had to fend for herself. There weren't many opportunities for women like her, not in a big city where everything was so competitive. She worked long hours as a seamstress, earning just enough to get by. The loneliness weighed on her, though. She would sit by the window at night, looking out over the dark streets, wondering what it would be like to have a family of her own, to be loved and cherished. One day, while flipping through a local newspaper, her eyes stopped at a small advertisement. It was simple, yet it grabbed her attention. The ad was placed by a man named Jack, a cowboy who lived in Texas. The words were few, but they painted a picture of a man looking for a wife, a partner to share his life with on his ranch. At first, Clara thought it was a joke. A cowboy in Texas. She could barely imagine what that would be like. But the more she read the ad, the more something inside her stirred. Jack wasn't just asking for a wife. He was looking for someone who would be a partner to help him with the tough life on the ranch. He promised to provide a good home, a stable life, and a chance to start fresh. Clara's heart raced as she read the letter once more. She was tired of being alone. She was tired of just existing. She wanted to live a life with purpose, to be a part of something meaningful. Maybe, just maybe, this cowboy could give her that. So, she did what she had never imagined herself doing. She wrote back. She told Jack about her life, her loneliness, her longing for something more. She didn't know if he would ever read her letter, but she felt a strange hope rising in her heart as she sealed the envelope. Weeks passed, and Clara nearly forgot about the letter. Then one morning, a letter arrived for her. It was from Jack. He had read her letter and wanted to meet her. He wrote about his ranch, the beautiful land, and the quiet life he led. He was kind in his words, but there was a certain firmness in his tone. He was a man used to hard work and wanted a wife who could stand beside him, not just in good times, but during the difficult moments as well. He asked if she would be willing to leave her city life behind and come to Texas to be with him. At first, Clara hesitated. The idea of leaving everything she had ever known was terrifying. But as she thought about it more, she realized she had nothing left to lose. She had no family, no future in Boston. This might be her only chance to find a new life. With a mixture of excitement and fear, she decided to take the leap. She packed her belongings into a small suitcase, said goodbye to the city she had called home, and boarded a train that would take her to the vast, unknown land of Texas. The journey was long and tiring, but Clara's thoughts kept drifting to what awaited her at the end of the track. She imagined a large ranch with open fields and a simple but happy life. She imagined meeting Jack, the man who would change her life. She hoped he would be kind and gentle, someone who would understand her and help her adapt to the new world she was about to enter. When she finally arrived in Texas, she was greeted by a dry heat that seemed to seep into her bones. The air was thick with dust and the landscape stretched out endlessly in all directions. There were no tall buildings, no crowds of people, just wide open spaces and rugged terrain. She felt small and out of place. Clara's heart raced as she stepped off the train, looking around for Jack. It wasn't long before she saw him. Jack was everything she had imagined, tall, strong, and commanding. But there was something about him that was even more intimidating than she had expected. His broad shoulders, his rough hands, and his stern face made Clara feel very small. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had made this choice, and that she was here to start a new chapter in her life. Jack looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. He had imagined Clara as a delicate woman who would bring some warmth and gentleness to his lonely ranch. But he hadn't expected her to look so fragile. She was much smaller than he had thought. Her hands, so dainty and soft, looked out of place compared to his own calloused ones. Her eyes, so wide and innocent, were filled with uncertainty. He couldn't help but wonder if she would be able to handle the life of a rancher. The work was hard, the days were long, and the land was unforgiving. "Welcome to Texas," Jack said in a deep, gruff voice. Clara nodded shyly, unsure of what to say. She was nervous about the journey ahead and nervous about the man standing before her. Jack's size alone made her feel small, and she wasn't sure how she would fit into this vast, untamed world. He led her to his ranch, a large house that seemed to blend into the rugged landscape. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as they walked through the dusty yard. The ranch was everything she had imagined in some ways, and nothing like she had expected in others. The open space, the livestock, the scent of earth and hay, all of it was overwhelming. She had never seen anything like it before. Jack gave her a tour of the ranch, showing her the various animals and the barn where she would be working. The whole time, Clara struggled to keep up with him. His long strides made it difficult to stay close. He was used to walking this land, to knowing it intimately. Clara, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in a foreign world. At the end of the day, Jack led her to a small room in the house that would be hers. It was plain and simple, with a bed covered in a rough quilt and a small wooden dresser. Clara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her as she sat down on the bed, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. She wondered if she had made a mistake coming here, if she would ever be able to fit into Jack's world. That night, as she lay awake in the quiet room, Clara thought about everything she had left behind. She thought about her family in Boston, the life she had known. And yet there was something in her that refused to give up. She had come this far. She had made the choice to be here. She would find a way to make it work, even if it meant learning how to live in a world so different from the one she had known. Tomorrow, she would have to face the challenges of ranch life, but for tonight, all she could do was wonder what the future would bring.